We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Civil rights activist and Baptist minister Martin Luther King Jr. is best remembered for his use of civil disobedience to advance equal rights for black folks. As the only non-president to have a national holiday in the United States named after him, you'd think Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. would be very well known. But the truth is that most people's knowledge of the iconic civil rights leader hardly touches the surface.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed.
So, today, we'll look at some surprising and little-known facts about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments below what other famous historical individuals you would like to hear more about. So let's talk about the King. King tried ending his own life. Martin Luther King chose to attend a parade at the age of 12 instead of staying at home and watching his little brother A.D., who was 6 at the time. Lacking any supervision, A.D. slid down a banister and ran into their grandmother, knocking her unconscious. She died as a result of a heart attack caused by the incident. Overcome with sadness, Martin believed he was responsible for his grandmother's death, even though it was not his fault. Embroiled with grief, the future civil rights leader tried to end his own life by jumping out of the second-story window of his family's home. Martin's father later recalled that he had been troubled for quite some time following the death of his grandmother and had begun to have difficulty sleeping. King began college at 15. Martin Luther King was a bright young man who showed great promise from an early age. He was so intelligent that he was able to skip grades 9 and 12 and was even accepted into college as a freshman at the age of 15. In 1944, he attended Morehouse College, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather. Despite the fact that his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had all been called to the ministry, King initially expressed no interest in becoming a Baptist minister. However, Morehouse president Benjamin E. Mays eventually persuaded King to change his mind. King also received an undergraduate degree in sociology and went on to obtain his second bachelor's degree in divinity from Crozer Theological Seminary in Chester, Pennsylvania. He had a PhD in systematic theology from Boston University by the age of 25.
Boston University is my alma mater. It meant so much to me in terms of the formulation of my thinking and the ideas that have guided my life.
King loved a white woman. Martin Luther King was a seminary student in Pennsylvania during the 1940s. While he was there, he began dating a woman named Betty, who worked in the cafeteria. However, Martin's friends urged him to end the relationship, citing concerns about his father's disapproval of an interracial relationship and his son dating someone considered to be beneath his social standing. According to David Garrow, author of Bearing the Cross, King was deeply affected by the breakup with Betty and struggled to move on from the relationship. Despite the emotional turmoil, the change had little impact on King's overall trajectory. King's father disliked his son's wife, Coretta Scott, as well. Is this just a case of a father not believing anyone was good enough for his son? No. He was actually hoping Martin Jr. would marry an opera singer named Mattie Wilder Dobbs. Young Martin had gotten a summer job harvesting tobacco near Hartford, Connecticut. Hailing from a middle-class Southern family, he was surprised to learn that black folks were not treated as second-class citizens everywhere in the United States. He wrote in a letter to his father, "We saw something on our way here that I had not expected to see. There was no discrimination after we passed Washington. The white people here are extremely friendly. We can go wherever we want and sit wherever we want." In a note to his mother, he wrote, "I never thought a person of my race could eat anywhere, but we ate at one of Hartford's finest restaurants and saw some of the city's biggest shows."
I think that is an answer to that myth, and it is that time is neutral.
King sought a concealed firearm permit. In the 1950s, Before he had begun advocating for passive resistance, Dr. Martin Luther King actually applied for a permit to carry a concealed weapon. He possessed a collection of firearms for self-defense and was often surrounded by armed guards who protected him and his family. In fact, King had so many guns, one of King's colleagues, Glenn Smiley, even referred to King's home as an arsenal. To be clear, King was more than just a gun collector. He had some legitimate reasons to be concerned about his life. In Alabama, for example, the Ku Klux Klan had placed a bounty on his head, and he was receiving death threats on a daily basis. Furthermore, his home and 2 churches in Montgomery had been bombed. Martin Luther King had no fear of danger. He faced numerous threats and survived at least one assassination attempt that came dangerously close.
We must not despair. We must not become bitter, nor must we harbor the desire to retaliate with violence.
A letter opener nearly killed the king. In 1958, it was a book signing. Isola Ware Curry approached King and said, "I've been looking for you for 5 years." She then stabbed him in the chest with a letter opener. Well-meaning bystanders were about to pull the letter opener out of the wound, which would have almost certainly killed King. Luckily, 2 New York City police officers stopped them. Instead, the police rushed King to Harlem Hospital, where doctors spent a labor-intensive 3 hours trying to remove the instrument. It turned out that it was dangerously close to King's aorta, and even a slight slip would have killed him. If you're wondering why Curry attacked King, it appears that she was suffering from a variety of mental illnesses. Curry would spend the rest of her life in psychiatric facilities and nursing homes after being diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic.
If I had sneezed, I wouldn't have had a chance later that year in August to try to tell America about a dream that I had had.
King was arrested 29 times. Fighting the system frequently entails doing some time. Moreover, during his many years of social activism, King was arrested on numerous occasions. In fact, he was imprisoned 29 times during his life, mostly for civil disobedience. There were also some questionable arrests. For example, one occurred in 1956. King was sent to jail in Montgomery, Alabama, for driving 5 miles over the speed limit. Yeah, that's right. King was a fan of Star Trek. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the famed civil rights leader and author of some of the most famous speeches about race relations in world history, was a big fan of Star Trek. It's actually not that surprising. Trek was a progressive show for its time, boldly going where no television show had gone before. For example, Star Trek featured the first interracial kiss ever on television. King was so into it that he is credited with convincing Nichelle Nichols to continue playing Uhura on Star Trek after season 1 ended. Nichols says that King wanted her to stay on the show not only because she was a black woman playing a main character on television, but because her character wasn't written based on popular stereotypes. Nichols' character was intelligent, and the other members of the crew treated her as an equal.
Security sweeps of all decks are negative, Mr. Spock. No evidence of intrusion.
Very well. Cancel red alert, but maintain increased security.
Aye, sir.
Also, Uhura was pretty awesome, which we're sure King the Trekkie noticed. King predicted his own death? Martin Luther King was assassinated on April 4th, 1968, in Memphis, Tennessee. Eerily, the night before he died, he spoke to a group of people at Mason Temple Church, telling his audience that he may not get to see the promised land alongside them. King said, "Like anybody, I want to live a long life. Longevity has its uses, but I'm not concerned with it right now. I've witnessed the promised land. I may not be able to accompany you, but I want you to know tonight that we will reach the promised land as a people." King was smoking when he got shot. Despite the fact that he was known to smoke on a regular basis, there are very few photographs of Martin Luther King with a cigarette in his mouth. This is because King actively concealed his habit. He did this for 2 major reasons. First, There was a social stigma attached to cigarette smoking, particularly since he was a minister. And second, he didn't want his children to see him smoke and become addicted to it. Regardless, he was unable to break the habit. And on the very day he was assassinated, he was on the balcony of his hotel smoking a cigarette. After he died, his friend, the Reverend Samuel Billy Kyles, allegedly removed a pack of cigarettes from King's pocket to conceal the fact that he had been smoking when he was killed. In 1974, 6 years after Dr. King was assassinated, his mother, Alberta Williams King, was killed. She was playing the organ at church when a man named Marcus Wayne Chennault Jr. stood up in the front pew of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. He pulled out 2 pistols and began firing. Chennault had actually intended to kill King's father, but killed Alberta instead because she was closer to him. She passed away in the church where her son preached nonviolence. Chennault was initially sentenced to death for his crime, but King's family opposed capital punishment and petitioned for him to receive life imprisonment instead. King got a Grammy. Martin Luther King Jr. won a Grammy, but not for wailing out a few hot tunes. We're not aware of any hidden singing talent in him. Following his death, King was awarded the Grammy for Best Spoken Word Album in 1971. He received the honor for his album, Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam. If you're wondering why he opposed the Vietnam War, he said, "I see this war as an unjust, evil, and futile war. I preach to you today because my conscience leaves me with no other choice."
And I don't know about you, I ain't gonna study war no more.
So what do you think? Which of these MLK facts surprises you the most? Please let us know in the comments section below. While you're at it, check out some of our other Black Discoveries videos.